You're your own worst enemy. The initial instinct is whether or not you did something wrong, you could talk your way out of it, especially if you think you did nothing wrong. Or you might think, well, maybe I did something wrong, but let me just play like I got nothing to hide, so I'll talk to it like I got nothing to hide. It's a bad idea. Everybody's seen cop shows where they say, and maybe you've had this in your living room or in your clubhouse, where they say to you, anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Your Miranda rights. Well, actually, that comes from a legal principle that many of you have heard of, called hearsay. Hearsay is a declaration made outside of court that we say to prove the truth of the matter asserted. But basically what it means is anytime anybody says he said this, she said that, you can't bring that into court unless there's an exception to the rule. And one of the known exceptions is in every court in the United States, federal court, state court, every state, is an admission against interest can always be introduced. So once you start talking, if you say things that reaffirm your innocence, if it's a criminal matter, or that you're not at fault, if it's a civil matter, anything that reaffirms your position can't be introduced. But if you slip up and you say something against you, that can be introduced. So, for example, they can, just telling where you were, they might be able to tie you to something that happened that you don't even know about. False identification happens all the time with motorcycle clubs. In your communities, you have people wearing patches that aren't in your club that may be mistaken for you because you wear a patch too. And if you get pulled into something that just because, you know something, I know I did nothing wrong, so I'm just going to let this play out. It's stupid. It doesn't make any sense. And it might not just be incriminating you. It might be another member of your motorcycle rights organization, or your motorcycle club, or if you're an independent rider, another guy who's on a bike. There's a saying, if nobody talks, everybody walks. Remember it. If nobody talks, everybody walks.
I got the t-shirt.
Oh, there you go, he's got the t-shirt. He's wearing it, okay? He's wearing it. Anyway, there's a lot of truth to that. Under the United States Supreme Court, which is the law of the land, police are legally allowed to lie to you. So they can tell you, when they separate two people, we're just separating you to make sure both of you have the same story. And then they come to you and they say, he said blah, 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 that you were packing this shit. What? He's full of shit. He had it, yeah. They can lie to you. Your brother kept his mouth shut. So, keep that in mind. Second thing. Full coverage is not what you think it means. A lot of times, people call us up, we do motorcycle accident cases. Personally, I've tried more motorcycle accident cases than any other attorney in the Northeast, I'm sure. I've tried more motorcycle accident cases than any other attorney in the Northeast, I'm sure. I get calls on motorcycle accident cases, and when people call me up, they talk about the other guy, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Gets to the point of the conversation where I ask them about their policy. And you can tell over the phone, they're just as all pumped up, and they say, I got full coverage. Like it's the best thing in the world. And right away I'm thinking to myself, he's got minimum limits. So here's what full coverage is. Full coverage typically covers collision and theft. Okay? Up to the book value of your bike. Which means, when you tell me, I got a show bike, it's a show bike. It's a 72 Sportster, but it's a show bike. It's worth 45 grand. And I'm like, well, book value is 1,800. That's what they're going to argue your bike is worth. Is 72. No, it's a show. I can show you pictures. It was in the 1982 cover of Easy Rider. You know, that doesn't mean they're going to pay extra money on it. That's not the way it works. But your limits are only 20 grand in liability, and the vehicle that hit you only has 20 grand. That means the most you're going to get for that crushed ankle is 20 grand from the other vehicle. Now for that full coverage, for your 72 Sportster, you get that 1,800. So now you got 21,800. Now I'll take a third off the 20,000. I won't take a fee on the property damage, so you're left with like not too much money. But for the same amount that you paid for that full coverage, you could have got increased liability limits, let's say 100,000. Same price. All you do is take off the collision and you increase your liability limits, and with that you can get something called SUM coverage. And with SUM coverage, that means supplemental underinsured motorist coverage. SUM, supplemental underinsured motorist coverage. So think of like the sum of all things. Something that I should get. Something that I should get. SUM. I know it's spelled wrong, but it's something I should get. When I talk to my broker, I want to talk about that sum coverage. When I got my homeowner's policy, I got an umbrella. And I said to my broker, I want my SUM limits on the umbrella, on my homeowner's policy. And my broker said to me, the only one that knows to ask for that are the lawyers. I had represented this woman who was a top executive at Allstate. And she was a passenger on ATV. And she was with her boyfriend. And they'd been drinking. And the boyfriend goes for like a ride, and he flips it, and she breaks her neck. She's in a halo. She could have gotten a lot of money. Of course. But there was no money because on her own coverage, she didn't have the SUM. And she was an executive for Allstate, and her brother was an executive for Allstate. And she said, when they trained us, when they taught us in insurance school, they never told us about this coverage. And the reason why the insurance carriers don't train their own people about this coverage is because there's no profit in it. They're trying to make money. That's an insurance company. Make as much money as you can, by collecting as much as possible premiums and paying out as little as possible in claims. So when you go there, that full coverage, typically, that just means you got collision in there, or theft. You want to get that SUM because you're more likely, if you're involved in a collision, to make more money by having increased liability limits in the SUM than you're ever going to get from getting that property damage covered on your SUM. I'll take questions at the end. You probably have a few. And most times you get that coverage from the other side on the property damage anyway. You won't get it right away. With your policy, you get it right away. Should we try and plug this in? Just for the hell of it? Yeah. See if it starts up. In addition to suing the other party, the money you get from workers' comp has to be paid back when you get the money from the other party. In most states, that's reduced by statute by a third. So if you pay back that money, you get a third off. So let's suppose, typically the way workers' comp will work, and it varies state by state, so if you say, no, I got this, I got that, what they'll do is they'll look at the past year's earnings. They'll come up with the average weekly wage. Before taxes, they'll take 2/3 of that amount, and you'll get that every 2 weeks, that double that amount every 2 weeks, bi-weekly payments. That's typically the way it works. You have to be disabled to get those payments. The doctor has to see you once every 45 days to get those payments. Now, the insurance company will have a doctor, and they'll look at you, and they'll say, he's 50% disabled. Your doctor says 100%. The judge in workers' comp will say, take it 75%. Now you get 75% of that amount. Your medical bills will get paid for. The doctors keep submitting bills, they get paid. All those bills, at the end of the case, when you sue the third party, have to be paid back. But that total number gets reduced by a third. That's the way a workers' comp claim works in a third party action in most states. Now, if you don't put it through comp, and you put it through your health insurance, and you have, let's say, working for a union, that has to get paid back also. Unless your health insurance is not a self-funded ERISA plan. Then it doesn't have to get paid back at all in most states. So, you might think, well then I shouldn't go to the doctor because they have to pay it back. No. The medical bills drive your claim. So you're going to end up getting more money because that's the proof of your injury. Lastly, ask your broker about gap insurance. Gap insurance is available in some states, not all. Gap insurance. I bought my bike, my last bike. I financed it with Harley Davidson financing. I got an automatic payment. It's pretty cheap. It's a 2018 Road Glide, and it's an automatic payment. It's only like a couple hundred a week. A month. A couple hundred a month. Pretty cheap. But they have in there finance charges. So the cost of the bike was like $21,400, something like that. The first bike I bought new, and I'm riding for like 45 years. In there is financing charges. So if I get into an accident the day after I buy that new bike, the insurance company will pay me for the value of the bike. But Harley Davidson Financing Corp wants the finance charges on top. So now I get full value for the bike, but I find out that check doesn't cover it. I gotta owe another $4,000. How could that be? I just drove the bike out of the dealership. It wasn't my fault. I was parked at a stop sign, and the woman plows into me, and I'm owed $4,000. How could that be? Because there's a gap between what the value of the bike was and the agreement I made with Harley Davidson Financing Corp. You can get gap insurance in some states, not all, that will pay for that extra money. So ask your broker about that. Another one. They go up to 3 things you should be. You're always being surveilled.
No.
Exactly, no, really. We had a case, the gentleman from Connecticut, I remember this story. There was a guy in a club, his first name Danny, just for the sake of the story. Danny's doing life in prison. The saying is he's in for the whole day. So Danny's in for the whole day, and he gets letters from his club brothers. And that's the thing that keeps him going. All of a sudden, the prison officials, they say, no, they're using codes. They write in the letters L and R, and that's a code. And we're stopping the mail. So he tells the brothers, not let my mail from the clubs come through, because they're saying we're using codes. So we have a meeting at our confederation, and I say, listen, I'm a civil attorney, I do accident cases, I look up the law, but I'm not a prisoner's rights guy. So one of the guys says, this guy in Connecticut, Norm Pattis, he does prisoners' rights cases. So I said, let me call him up. So I called Norm Pattis, and he says, in a case like this, I need a $5,000 retainer. So I go back to the Confederation, I said, this is what I'll do. Now these guys, they take care of me. They send me accident cases. They put food on my plate. So I love these guys. They're my brothers. And so I said, I'll put $2,500, you put $2,500. We'll start the case with Norm Pattis and Dan. We'll start the case. So, at first, calling off, oh, it's good, we filed suit, everything looks good. Then a couple of years go by, and Norm's not talking to Danny, and Danny's calling his brother saying, I try to send him letters, he doesn't respond to me, I don't know what's going on with the case. So they call me up, and I say, I'll call him up. So, I said, look, I'm president of the New York State Academy of Trial Lawyers. If I call somebody up, they answer. The largest trial bar in New York State, I'm the president. I'll call him. So I call him up, and he doesn't answer. So I call up one of the guys from the club, and I say to him, this fucking guy's not answering. It's crazy. I said, I don't know what's going on. I said, I think I got to pay him a visit. So the guy at Patch says, I'll go with you. I said, all right, we'll go together. I think we got to pay him a visit. See what's going on. Now, I'm going to go to his office and say, what's going on? You don't return phone calls? The next week, Norm shows up at the federal penitentiary where Danny's being held, and he says, Danny, you want to kill me? And Danny says, why would I want to kill you? You're my lawyer, right? And he says, well, this has never happened to me, but the feds contacted me, and they said that your club has this consigliere legal program who put a hit out on you. So Danny says, I don't know about that. I don't know anything about that. I'll find out. Don't worry, I don't want to kill you. You're my lawyer. I don't want to kill you. So he calls up and he tells the guy, and the guy's like, no, where do you think we are? Do we kill lawyers? What is he, crazy? So then they called me up and they tell me the story, and I'm like, these fucking guys, they thought we're talking in code. We want to pay them a visit. It means we want to, off the guy. Meantime, we want to pay him a visit. And you call up your prospect and you say, pick up my dry cleaning, and they think that means you're picking up a kilo of coke. Meantime, we have laundry too. So if it can happen to me, it can happen to you, and it probably is happening to you. I was just talking to somebody beforehand, how they did a freedom of information law request. And one of the reasons why they don't have to respond to that is ongoing investigation. And I send these things out all the time. And they don't respond in a timely fashion, as they're required under the law. And when they do respond, it's either redacted or it's old. And they use the excuse. And I circulate the stuff that's old just to say, this is probably what's going on now. But I show it to people because I say that, look, one of the reasons why they don't have to respond to this is because of an ongoing investigation. You got an ongoing investigation. And people typically, they say, I know not to say anything stupid on the phone, but then they have a few drinks and they get angry, and they say, I'm going to kill this fucking guy. They're not killing him, they're just pissed off. But then the guy shows up missing and they take a pitch. So, you're always being surveilled. Which comes under the first rule, you're no worse enemy. Okay. You should have some familiarity with RICO. Here's the way RICO works. 2 offenses within 10 years. And those list of offenses can be anything you ever dreamed of. One guy in your club beat somebody up, and one guy in your club took a pinch with a gram of coke, whatever. Now, that's it. One happened 7 years ago, one happened 4 years ago. Now they think your club is doing something, boom. They hammer down a RICO. And they bring everybody in there. And it's not the guy that beat everybody up alone, and it's not the guy that took a pinch with a gram of coke. It's everybody in the club. Now, you're facing, they seize all your shit. This is the way it works. They are entitled to, under the statute, to take everything before you're proven guilty. They confiscate everything before you're proven guilty. That's under the law. The assets can be frozen. And it's very difficult to get it back. Seize bank accounts. They shut everything down. Even your personal assets. Your car, your bike. Because they say these are ill-gotten gains of criminal enterprise. Now, they say, Jim, not you. They say, Jim, we're not after you, we're after Bob. You roll over, we let you go. But you gotta give us something. So now they're playing one against the other. And you're looking at 20 years to life. And it's a strong tool. So you gotta think to yourself, did somebody in my club take a pinch? Sure. Who else? Yeah, that guy got jammed up too. Okay, now they got something. That's all they need to prove you're a criminal enterprise. It's not fair. It was used to shut down a mob. In 1972, President Nixon enacted it to get rid of La Cosa Nostra. But when you look at the website for the U.S. Attorney's Office in your area, most of these websites, right on their page, will say, we've got an organized crime and gang task force. Right on the website. And right on the website, it will say, we're going after La Cosa Nostra, the Russian mob, boom, 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 and motorcycle clubs. No, motorcycle gangs. They don't call them clubs, they call them gangs. Outlaw motorcycle gangs. Right on the website, that's what they're going after. They got a task force set, and you're lumped in with them. Which means they got funding. They're getting federal money. They're getting your taxpayer dollars to go after motorcycle clubs. They put it right on their page. So you're in there with La Cosa Nostra and the Russian mob and M15 and, you know, Mala Sabrea or whatever, you know, what else is going on. So, watch out. Don't waive the right to competent counsel. That's the first thing. Something goes on. Am I free to leave? I want to leave. Recognizes. If you're being detained, you have to express that you want to leave. Otherwise, you can keep detaining you. Once you express that you want to leave, everything changes. And if they say you can't leave, I have nothing to say without a lawyer. That doesn't prove you're innocent or guilty, it proves you're smart. And I want my lawyer. You gotta say that. Don't I get a lawyer? That's not it. They can keep you there. That's not good enough. Don't I get a lawyer? Aren't I supposed to be given a lawyer? Don't I have the right to a lawyer? No, I want my lawyer. You can't afford a lawyer. You say, I want a court-appointed lawyer. I don't have the money to pay for a lawyer. I want a court-appointed lawyer. I'm not saying anything, I want a lawyer. If they don't have anything on you, they gotta let you go. Because they can't go, the cop can't go to the prosecutor and say, we don't have anything on him, but he won't talk. You must know something. That's not enough. And if they have something on you that gives them the right to detain you, then you should get a lawyer. Another expression. You want justice? How much justice can you afford? Unfortunately. The last one. People lie in court.
No.
You might say, oh, I know that. But every trial I've done, and I've done more trials than we got people in this room. Every trial I've done, my client feels compelled to tell me at some point in the trial, no, he's lying. Really? Yes. Like there's some sort of novelty to that. Like I didn't think they were gonna lie. They're lying. He's lying. Oh, they're a liar. This is not. And you got this thing. That's okay. Go on into this. That's okay. Nothing wrong. I'll let this thing work out. I'll trust this. You can't pretend that just because you're right, everything done in front of a jury. And you don't get to sit on your own jury. If you were able to sit on your own jury and judge your own case, you would never have any risk of losing your case. Because you would get to decide. I know what's right, so it's going to work out the way that I think is right. I just want what's fair. What's fair to you? What's fair to you will be fair if you get to sit on your jury. If you think you're going to get what's fair, that means you get to sit on your own jury, and every time it's going to work out that way. But you don't get to sit on the jury, and you don't get to decide what's fair because you're subjective. And the reason why you're subjective is because you're the subject of your story. The jury is not the subject of your story. And if you try the same case with the same witnesses, the same judge, the same lawyers, the same opening statements, the same closing arguments, the same objections made, everything. If you try that case in front of two different juries, you're going to get two different results. And if you try that case in front of 50 different juries, you're going to get 50 different results. And if you put all those results on a table, and you took the time to start turning them over, some of those you'd be happy with. Some of those you'd be disappointed in. And some maybe you won't be too happy, but not too disappointed. But when you go to trial, you only get to turn one over. And that's the way our justice system works. Of course, having a good lawyer, experienced lawyer helps. But don't be surprised that everybody in the case is going to lie. Because they're thinking you're lying too. Because a lot of times my clients tell me the story about what happened, and they've told the story over and over to their friends, their families, and they say, this is how it happened. And I'll tell them that's a shitty story. I say, why is that? And I say, because look at this evidence. And I start showing them evidence in the case that we know. Maybe it's just the speed of a motorcycle. A motorcycle travels, if it's going